Paul Gilbert, Jeff Beck, Zakk Wylde, James Hetfield, Eddie Van Halen. What do all these guys have in common? Well, they're hunks. The other thing they have in common is that they're hunks who recorded some of their most noteworthy work on guitars sans tremolo. But what is it about the wang bar free lifestyle that's so appealing? On today's video, we ask the immortal question, why do guitar players like fixed bridges? Hey there kids, it's your good buddy Uncle Ben, and allow me to introduce you to my new buddy. It's this Schecter USA Custom Shop KM6 Pro. That's the Keith Merrow signature model that I just picked up from the fine folks over at Sweetwater. This thing has not left my mitts since. It's absolutely unbelievable. One of the greatest guitars I've ever played in my life. And one of the things I like the most about it is that it doesn't have a tremolo. Now don't get me wrong, a lot of my favorite guitars have tremolos on them, and I love them and use them all the time. But there's something about the simplicity of a hardtail super strat especially that I just adore. And maybe by the end of this video, you'll see why and go out and find yourself a hardtail honey of your own. As always, this video is brought to you guys by everybody who supports my channel over on my Patreon page at patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars. Sign up today for all kinds of good stuff like bonus videos, backing tracks, downloadable tabs, and so much more. Even for just $1 a month. So don't delay. Sign up today. Gear-wise for this video, I'll be playing my Schecter KM6 Pro. This thing is seriously insane. I want to do a full Meet the Machines video and tell you guys all about it. There's not really a lot of information about these things online, so I think the world needs it. Let me know in the comments section below if you guys would like to check out a video all about this lovely axe. I'm playing this into a Horizon Devices precision drive, into my PRS Archon 50, into the Universal Audio aux. There's reason number one for you right there. It's easy as hell to change tunings on the spot, unlike any guitar with a tremolo on it. Because who doesn't want to go from Slayer to Soundgarden? In a matter of seconds. And yeah, I know there's tremolos that have the D tune on them and all that jazz, but just bear with me here. I'm trying to make a video. Over my many years as a guitar teacher, I can't tell you how many times I had students come in with guitars that they'd just gotten, that they were super hyped on. They had a tremolo on them and all that jazz. And they'd be all excited and they'd want to learn like Killing in the Name Of by Rage Against the Machine, which is in drop D. And it's like, well, sorry kid, we're going to spend half your lesson just changing the tuning of one string on your guitar. Because as anybody who's ever tried to change tunings on a guitar with a trem knows, it's a pain in the ass. And that's just by nature of how tremolos have to work. You've kind of got this balancing seesaw effect where you've got the strings over here on the front and the springs in the back pulling at equal tension to each other to keep the bridge level. But the minute that you change the tuning of even just one of the strings up here on the top, it makes the entire bridge park down further into the body like that, which pulls every string sharp at different increments, and it's just a huge hassle. But as we all know, no trim, no trouble. All you gotta do is change the tuning to whatever you want to, and you're there. For me, the ease of changing tunings is extremely important on all levels. If I'm playing a show and one song is in standard, then the next is in drop D, that means I don't have to stop the whole set while I go and change guitars or whatever. I also can't even tell you how many times I've shown up to a gig and a singer's been a little under the weather and wants to play the entire thing tuned down a half step instead. If I showed up with a Floyd Rose guitar, I am screwed, but with a hardtail, it's not that big a deal. For me, it's also extremely important whenever I am in the creative mode. Whenever I'm writing, I might be changing tunings back and forth, trying to find the right key that a particular riff needs to be in, and if I can't freely do that, it really slows my progress down. Last year, I read the book Atomic Habits, which I strongly recommend if you're looking to build more productive and efficient habits in your everyday life, which I think most of us are. And in the book, there's a huge emphasis on inconvenience and how it can completely stop productivity, and that really rang true for me whenever I was thinking about the way that I write. Because I know for myself, if it's late night and I'm like playing guitar on the couch while I'm watching Game of Thrones reruns and the dragons are inspiring some pretty sick riffs in me, but man, maybe it'd be cooler if it was in drop D tuning or whatever. Am I gonna pause GOT and get off the couch and walk to the studio and change guitars and tune that one up and it's in drop tuning? Am I gonna do that? Of course I'm not. I am lazy as fuck. Even the slightest inconvenience is enough to stop me dead in my tracks. And I know it's not just me, it's a lot of us. So for me, being able to change tunings whenever I want to really keeps the productivity flowing by eliminating that inconvenience. Now I could also sidebar right here and talk about how being stuck in one tuning actually breeds creativity by limiting the choices and options that might be presented otherwise if you could just change tunings on the fly. But I'm not gonna. It doesn't suit the narrative. The number 2 reason that we like hardtails is that it's just so much easier to keep the damn things in tune. There's just less that can go wrong. Look at it this way. Whenever you have a tremolo equipped guitar that won't stay in tune, finding out why can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Here's just a few of the things you gotta check for if your wang bar shenanigans are knocking your guitar out of tune. It could be that you haven't stretched those ropes out enough. Or it could be that one or more of your springs back here is worn out or damaged. Or maybe the tremolo itself has dull knife edges resting up against those points, and that's keeping it from staying in tune. What did you have for lunch today? That might have an effect. What if it's one of your locking nut pads, or even the nut itself getting grooves dug into it from wear and tear over the years? That would suck. It could be that one or both of your tremolo posts have started to wear down the wood that they're drilled into, and it's moving the entire bridge around every time you touch the bar. It could be because it's Tuesday. You know, I was thinking about it, and it could be that the string retainer bar is either too tight or not tight enough. Have you had a banana today? Could make a difference. Did you try whispering sweet nothings to it? Or spitting on it? And that's just a handful of them. There's actually more reasons beyond that why trims don't stay in tune. Whereas with a hardtail guitar, it is just sweet, sweet simplicity, especially if it has an extremely well-cut nut like this one does, and locking tuners like this one does. Typically, if your hardtail guitar is not staying in tune, it's because of friction back here at the bridge or up at the nut. Both of those things can be cured with the incredibly named Big Ben's Nut Sauce, which I strongly recommend having for all your guitars. That'll solve those issues. It also could just be that the strings aren't stretched enough. Again, that's kind of a user error thing. But just in general, it's way easier to keep a hardtail guitar in tune. So those have been pretty obvious reasons so far, but let's get down to one that I don't think people talk about enough, which is the way that tremolos can affect your vibrato and bends. Now, this is not at all a knock on tremolo players' vibrato. Some of the best vibrato in the world belongs to tremolo-equipped players like Steve Vai and Dimebag Darrell. This is just a point of physics that I feel like enough people don't talk about. Check this out. Watch what happens to the bridge of this guitar whenever I do a bend. And don't look at my feet. That stuff's for Patreon only. Okay, whenever I bend a string, do you see that? See how the entire bridge pitches forward? That is really important. Because essentially, every time that the bridge is pitching forward, it's making all those strings go flat. That means that as you're doing a bend or vibrato and you're pushing the string upwards sharp, the bridge is actually fighting you and knocking the note down flat. So you're actually having to work a little bit harder. And it's not just the string that you're playing either, it's all of them because they're all connected to the same bridge, obviously. Check this out. I'm gonna hit my high E string and then I'm gonna bend the low E and listen how flat it'll knock it. You can hear that's like a quarter step, about half of a half step every time I'm doing that bend. That means I've got to work that much harder if I'm trying to do that to the string that's in play. And of course that holds true for your vibrato as well, especially if you have that like Brandon Ellis style super wide vibrato. You can see how much that entire bridge moves every time I wiggle that string. Now if I do that same experiment on this hardtail guitar, you'll notice there's basically no change in pitch. So again, I'll hit the high E string, bend the low E string really hard, and you won't really hear it move. It's maybe making the guitar flex enough to where you're talking about a difference of like a cent or so, but that's, let's be honest, unnoticeable whenever you're playing or listening. So whenever I do bends and vibrato on a hardtail guitar, it makes me happy knowing that the motions my hands are making are actually what I'm hearing and it's not being affected by the bridge fighting me. You know, while we're on the subject of bends and vibrato, let's cover this one. If you've ever wondered why country players play tellies instead of strats, it's not necessarily just tone and tradition. There's another reason for that too. Have you ever wondered why every time you hear Vi or Satriani do a double stop bend, it's always in motion? It's always got vibrato on it, whether it's from the hands or the bar, either one. I'm talking about those Hendrix style bends where you keep one string stationary and the other one moves. On a guitar with a tremolo, those are never truly in tune, because of the reason that we talked about a second ago. Whenever you bend one string, the entire bridge pitches forward. That means the note that's supposed to be stationary in a unison bend is actually going flat. See, if I don't apply vibrato to it, you'll hear that central note kind of descend. It's not in tune at all. Even when the notes are in tune, they're actually not in tune. They're a little bit flat. You could say this is kind of a beneficial limitation though, because it does encourage you to keep those notes in motion, which sounds more bitchin' anyway. Which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. That can sound really great in the right time and place, but maybe you're playing that clean country ballad thing and you need that super in-tune pedal steel sounding unison bend thing. Yeehaw! And of course, there's one thing that we gotta address whenever people are talking about hardtail versus tremolo guitars, and that's the sustain.
The sustain, listen to it. I'm not hearing it. You would, though, if it were playing. You can go and have a bite, and you can still be hearing that one. Yeah.
They typically have plenty, but this is kind of a hot science because there's a lot of different factors at work here. It's not just does the string terminate in a tremolo or a string through kind of design, or if that motorcycle guy is as cool as he thinks he is. Spoilers, he's not. There's a lot of factors at play here. I think one of the biggest things that attributes to sustain in an instrument is the sum total of the resonant frequencies of all the different pieces of wood. Now, I don't know what they should be or what they shouldn't be exactly, but you know, every piece of wood has a peak resonant frequency, and I think that if the neck wood and the body wood are resonating at a way that mathematically makes sense with each other, that's a recipe for the string to continue sustaining. Whereas two badly matched pieces of wood might vibrate in a way that actually absorbs some of that string vibration and kills sustain. Whatever is actually going on here, fixed bridge guitars just typically have tons of it. Think about the Les Paul, right? Everybody knows Les Paul sustains like nothing else. Not to say that tremolo guitars don't, I think it's just a little bit more rare, whereas most hardtail guitars that I pick up really do sustain like crazy. And of course you have the tone factor as well, which is where you get into entirely subjective stuff. Some people just like the way that tremolo guitars sound over hardtails. It's a real apples to oranges kind of scenario. But I think that there is something to be told about the fact that Eddie Van Halen famously used his Ibanez Destroyer on most of the tracks off of Van Halen 1. We all think about the Frankenstrat when we think about that legendary tone on that record, but in reality, anything that didn't have bar action on it was recorded on a hardtail guitar. So were other tunes later on in his career, like Hot for Teacher, that was on a Flying V, and a lot of others we could name off. So better or worse, it's kind of hard to say, but well, hell, Eddie did it, so there's got to be something to it. And the last thing that I want to point out, which is not up for debate at all, is that changing strings is just a hell of a lot easier. You don't have to castrate those strings before you put them on. You don't really have to stretch them as much. There's no worry about taking all the strings off if you want to like polish your frets or whatever. It's not going to make the bridge sink back into the guitar and cause huge setup problems whenever you put strings back on it. Everything is just more simple. And very much like those Skinnerd boys, I am a simple kind of man, so when it comes to changing strings, I love the simplicity of having a hardtail guitar. So there you go, guys, a glimpse into the world of sweet simplicity that awaits you if you ditch the wang bar and snag yourself a hardtail. I personally wish there was a lot more hardtail super strat guitars like this one. This thing is seriously nuts. If you guys want a full Meet the Machines video on this, be sure to let me know down there in the comments section. And if this has inspired you to go on a quest for a fixed bridge fantasy of your own, be sure to click the Sweetwater affiliate link down there in the video description, shop around, and find yourself something nice. Because you know, I like things that are nice. And I bet you do too. Thanks so much for liking the video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell down there for notifications every time I upload a new slice of fried gold. If you've liked this video and want to help support my channel, and you also just happen to love tons of bonus goodies, I recommend you check out that Patreon page over at patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars. Even $1 a month gets you access to tons of awesome stuff. Well guys, it's been fun as always, but now it's time for me to get away from the camera so I can go mash some rope on this lovely Schecter KM6 Pro. I recommend you guys get away from the computer, grab that axe, and do some mashing of your own. Less clicking, more picking.